Welcome to our video on the intake and output of fluids. This is a topic that involves the conversions, mostly from the household system, as everything needs to be recorded in milliliters. This topic is often referred to as I&O, and it is explained on pages 86 through 89 of your workbook. When we record intake, we'll be using a log or sheet to record in milliliters all of the liquids that our patient ingests. You'll want to include things with or without caffeine. You'll also include things like broth and their juice, anything that they drink, anything that they eat that is in liquid form. You'll want to make sure to include medications, so whether that's liquid medications that they swallow, whether it's fluid to help them swallow pills, whether it's an IV or a tube feeding, all of that is recorded as part of the liquids that they ingest. You also want to include items that would be liquid at room or body temperature. So if they eat a popsicle, if they eat ice chips, if they eat Jell-O, these are included as liquids because at room temperature they would be liquids. Finally, make sure that as you read through a word problem you do not include solid items. So sometimes they'll mention that they had crackers or a bagel or toast or something of that nature. Because these items are not liquids, they are not recorded with their fluid intake. A separate column then on the chart is for output. For output, you're again recording all of the fluids, so everything that leaves the body in fluid form. This would include urine, any wound drainage, any watery stool, and any vomitus. Again, when you're dealing with a word problem, do not include solid bowel movements. Sometimes these are given in grams, and because grams cannot be converted to milliliters, it would not be included on the output chart. The final calculation that a nurse may need to do is to calculate the hourly urine output. Typically, we are looking for between 30 and 50 milliliters per hour for proper renal function. The way that hourly urine output is calculated is that you take the total urine output and divide by the hours of your shift. So for example, in this chart, both the intake of fluids, and you see all sorts of things that we had mentioned earlier, is recorded, and the output is recorded. At the bottom of the chart, the 8-hour total has already been calculated. So the total urine output for the 8 hours is 925 milliliters. In order to calculate the hourly urine output, we take the total, 925, and we divide it by the 8-hour shift, and we would calculate that this person's average hourly urine output is about 115.6 or 116 milliliters per hour. So those are the details. Now let's take a moment to look at a word problem. Typically the word problems are a paragraph of the foods that the patient has ingested. What I like to do is to skip to the bottom of the paragraph and look at the question. So for this paragraph it says, calculate the patient's oral intake of fluids in milliliters. Now as I read through the question, I want to underline or circle anything that is intake, and then I want to ignore all of the rest. So starting at the beginning, the patient had nothing orally for breakfast. For lunch, the patient was allowed to take 120 milliliters of water, so that's one of the items for intake. The patient vomited 180 cc's at 1300 hours and voided 100 milliliters at 1330 hours. At 1400 hours, the patient took 2 tablespoons of Jell-O. Since Jell-O is a liquid at room temperature, I need to include that. And a half cup of apple juice, another liquid. So to calculate the intake for this patient, I have 120 milliliters of water. I also have 2 tablespoons of Jell-O, which I need to convert over to milliliters. So I use my household conversions. I know that 1 tablespoon is the same as 15 milliliters. So I set up a little dimensional analysis problem, cancel the tablespoons, and that converts to be 30 milliliters of liquid. And then I have the half cup of apple juice. So again, I'm going to do a little bit of math. I'm going to write a half cup as 0.5 so that I have it as a decimal. I'm going to set up the dimensional analysis, so I know that 1 cup is 8 ounces. That cancels cup. I also know that 1 ounce is 30 milliliters, and so that cancels ounce. And again, I do the calculations and I come up with 120 milliliters. Now the problem asks me for the total. I have everything converted to milliliters, so I just need to add my answers. So 120 plus 30 plus 120 gives me a total of 270 milliliters for their oral intake of fluids. All right, we have a second word problem. This one is a lot longer. And so again, I'm going to skip to the bottom of the problem and see what questions are asked before I even start reading, so I know what information to look for. So scanning from the bottom, starting right here, it says, before you may leave, you must first calculate the 8-hour totals for intake and output of fluids, so underlining that. You must also calculate her hourly urine output. And it says to please show work. So now I'm going to read through the problem and underline, circle the different pieces of information that I need. So starting at the top, your patient is having her fluids carefully monitored. Your shift started at 7 a.m. At 7:30 a.m. you served her breakfast. She drank 6 ounces of coffee, so there's one thing that I need for intake. 4 ounces of juice, along with her bagel and cream cheese. The bagel and cream cheese are not fluids, so I don't need to include them. She voided, remember that's our code word for urinating, so 145 milliliters at 9:30 a.m. She had a cup of tea, so that's intake, I'm going to underline that, at 10:30. At noon she had 2 ounces of Jell-O, and that's liquid at room temperature, so I need to include that, and a half cup of broth. At 12:20 she voided, okay, need that for the outputs, circle that information, 230 milliliters. She napped during the afternoon. At 2:15 she drank 2 ounces, so that's intake, to swallow her pills. She also took a teaspoon, that's a liquid, so need that too, of liquid medication, and she voided, so circle that for the output. Your shift ended at 3 p.m. So I'm going to sort my information into 2 columns. I have the intake, and over here give myself some room to do conversions. I have output. So I'm going to go back through and just record the information that I've underlined or circled. So under intake, she had 6 ounces of the coffee. She had 4 ounces of juice. And output there was 145 mLs. And then she had 1 cup of tea. And she had 2 ounces of Jell-O. She had a half cup of broth. I'm going to record that as a 0.5 so that I have ease for doing the math. I have another voiding here of 230. She drank 2 ounces to swallow our meds and 1 teaspoon of medication, and voided one more time, 95 mLs. So I think I've recorded all the information. Now I have to calculate everything in milliliters, so I'm going over to the intake, and I know that there are 30 milliliters to an ounce, so I'll multiply that by 30, 6 times 30, 180 mLs. And again for this one, so 4 times 30, 120 mLs. For the cup, I know that a cup is 8 ounces, so multiply by 8. And I know that an ounce is 30 mLs, so multiply by 30. And so that would give me a total of 240 mLs. I multiply by 30 mLs to an ounce, so this would be 60 mLs. A cup, so a half a cup, so I'm going to convert by multiplying 8 ounces to a cup, multiplying 30 milliliters to an ounce, and so this comes out to be 120 milliliters. 2 ounces we did before, so we multiply by 30 milliliters per ounce, and we get 60 mLs. And a teaspoon we know is equal to 5 mLs. And so we have everything converted to milliliters. Now I'm going to go get my calculator so that I can use that to do the math. So I'm going to do intake first. So I have 180 plus 120 plus 240 plus 60 plus 120 plus 60 and plus 5 equals, so I have a total intake, get to the right place here, so this is total, let me look at that number again, of 785 milliliters. And then I need to do output, so again I'm going to get my calculator to do the output, clear everything, and so I have 145 plus 230 plus 95, so a total of 470, and that's one of the things I'm supposed to record. So right here, total is 470 milliliters. And then I'm also to figure out the hourly urine output, so the total divided by the length of the shift. It says I started the shift at 7 a.m. and I end at 3 p.m. So I just take my calculator, that 470, and divide it by the 8 hours of the shift, and we get hourly is 58.75. So 58.75 milliliters per hour. And so we have all of our answers here, and we got this answer right here, 470 divided by 8 to get to that answer. And we've completed all the questions. So that concludes our look at input and output. Please use your workbook to do some practice problems.